Thank you all for joining us for our Ask the Lab session. I am here today with Stan Zanarati, Mike Phillips, Jamie Clark, and Dan Jablonski, who will take your questions on anything you've seen over these last 2 days or any new questions that you have. Let's quickly just go around the room and all of you guys can introduce yourselves. Stan, let's start with you.
Hi, I'm Stan Zanarati, CTO and co-founder, and I'm in charge of the lab.
Great, and Dan?
Dan Jablonski, senior consultant, the only person of the bunch here that doesn't work in the lab, I believe.
Mike?
We still like you, Dan. It's all right. I'm Mike Phillips, technical director. I work on things like Diveline, hosting, Beverage Link, security, ProDiver, some other stuff too.
And Jamie?
Hey, Jamie Clark. I'm the other technical director and involved, of course, in DivePort and Spectre and Measure Factory and a bunch of things as well. Happy to get talking here.
Great. So logistics-wise, if you have any questions that you want to ask, they should go into the chat. We even disabled the Q&A button, so it just makes it easier for me to see everything in one place. If we don't get to your question, don't worry. We will have some rooms that are open for half an hour at 3 o'clock Eastern time, where you can ask any outstanding questions or just chat with our developers. So more details on that at the end of this session. So to start off, there were several questions yesterday about availability of certain features that we saw, or what version of Diver platform is required for those features. So question is, which features are available, which are coming soon, and which are far into the future? And then what are the software requirements for those?
All right, I can start on some of those. The things that I remember that I talked about, the Springboard is a future. It is a project in development right now, and we're still quite a ways out from being able to release that. Most of the charts that you saw today, Gantt, and yesterday, Gantt tree map, and the heat matrix, or sorry, the hex bin, those are all available already in 21, which was released just recently. I think tree map was earlier. Tree map was probably in 20. The My Library stuff that Annie demonstrated, that's also a feature. We're using that in some demos at the moment, but it's almost ready for release. So it should be soon.
And along those lines, security improvements we talked about are coming out this fall, that whole cloud authentication stuff. And one thing we didn't talk about much was improvements to the Spectre engine, which are also due in the same timeline as Springboard. And those are kind of cool because they'll let us do some really crazy optimizations we couldn't do before. Imagine the problem of trying to render an entire DivePort page with 50 different indicators on it. Right now, we might ask Diveline for each of those queries individually, but a lot of them are similar. They have a lot of overlap. So we're trying to figure out how to do that holistically, sort of all at once. What's the best speed we can get for doing a bunch of related queries? So that's coming up, and that's going to be really cool too.
All right, and then in the Q&A earlier today, we had a question from Eduardo about if there are any requirements for DIUC. And Mike, I know that you answered Eduardo in the chat. If you want to give that answer again.
DIUC is great, and it's free, and you can just have it. So you don't need a license for it. It does include stamp templates, which are only useful if you're using Measure Factory stamps, but you can grab the whole package and run with it today.
Great. And then another question from today's Q&A, Glenn had asked, is there a Measure Factory kit? So a simple walkthrough of the relationships between measures, rules, and data sources. Jamie.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. At the moment, we don't have a kit exactly, at least not according to this idea that Tim was talking about with the analyst and developer kits. Those are pretty new. And so I think we're kind of still feeling out where we're going to go with those. So we don't really have a plan at the moment for a Measure Factory kit, but I think we probably could once we get the feel for how these work out. But in the meantime, I mean, we have training resources and documentation on Measure Factory. I believe we have some videos that you can come up to speed by watching those.
Great. So just a reminder, everyone can put questions in the chat. We'd love to see some questions. But guys, what do you want to talk about? Is there anything that you want to let people know that we didn't really have a chance to discuss in the conference?
I could go into some more detail about the new Spectre stuff that Mike was talking about. We didn't get a chance to go into that. I know that like something I'm kind of excited about is that right now when Spectre works with data, it goes against a C-base, or multiple C-bases, and that's just a binary encoded table. So there's not, there's a lot of thought that went into getting that format just right, but the table itself is fairly straightforward. It's just a table of data. And one of the things that we're going to improve on that in the future is when you do certain kinds of data changes, you can change not just not the whole table at once necessarily, but maybe one column or another column, and leave the other columns the same. And so that would mean like you'd have to rewrite that entire C-base just because one column changed. It would be nice if you could use the data that you've already got before. Here's one of the slides we were going to use but didn't use. Yeah. And so the idea of having a column be the result of a build, or a set of columns as opposed to this monolithic table, I think is going to open up a lot of doors for us. It sounds like a kind of simple concept at first, but when it applies to, say, the Measure Factory, where basically everything in the Measure Factory is some kind of column rather than a single big table, it's going to open up a lot of doors. And this is what the other part of this next generation stuff, the idea that multiple requests currently come in and we treat them separately as in separate processes. And it would be nice if we could put them all together and run them sharing data between those processes. That's going to speed things up.
All right, well, we have started to get some questions in, which is great. So I'm just going to start at the top. When will the automatically expiring accounts feature be available?
I want to put that into 22, which is coming out next month. It might not make it till 23, but it is scheduled for this fall. It's something that we have, no one's actually asked us for this particular feature. It just seems like, oh yeah, why don't we have this feature? And we wanted it for our own cloud operations because we're always auditing who has access to what, and it would just save some trouble if things just sort of clean themselves up. So that's the answer to that one.
In Springboard, will it be possible to dive as well?
Yes, it has to be. One of the things that we're hoping that Springboard can do is cover a lot of use cases of ProDiver, not just in rendering reports, but also in data analysis. And so we're going to have displays in Springboard that you can dive in a similar way to ProDiver. It might not be exactly the same user interface, but definitely diving into the data and seeing the underlying data.
Can you create measures without licensing Measure Factory?
So I like this question. We have a couple of ideas on this front, and I think it kind of boils down to what is a measure. You don't get all of the benefits of a Measure Factory without the Measure Factory. So that includes the data governance, and it includes a lot of the metadata and some of the things in DivePort that take advantage of the whole factory, like being able to do time series automatically, or being able to have the indicators already know which direction is a good direction for this value. But you can create measure-like things in C plans, which are, think of calcs as they are right now. What we're looking for doing in the future is turning on some of those DivePort features for calcs without necessarily having to have the whole Measure Factory there. So in that case, if we can get this right, then you should be able to use some of these new DivePort side Measure Factory features without having Measure Factory. It still won't be the same thing as having the measure, but it gets you a lot of those features that maybe you're looking for.
Any info available on Toolkit?
Is that, Alicia, is that a reference? Well, I guess type your answer to this question, but is that a reference to the toolkits that Tim talked about today? Or do you mean Toolkit, the thing that Leiden has for seeing what your server is up to? Or I guess now the answer is probably both, because I mentioned both of those. So the latter, Leiden, the Netherlands office has an excellent program called Toolkit, which is very similar to our site stats. And we do have plans to integrate those two together to get the best of both worlds, probably early next year. And if you don't know what site stats is, then that's something that support can install for you along with DIAdmin, just to get a nice little portal that describes what your users are doing. And it's a fantastic way to do your user auditing and just seeing what pages are popular. As far as the other toolkits go, Jamie, you want to talk about those? The analyst toolkit and the developer toolkit?
Yeah, I mean, those are, like I said earlier, those are still fairly new. So it's I don't have a lot of like practical information about when those are coming out, but the general idea about them is to make it easy to get started on certain roles, basically. In the case of the analyst, you're having Measure Factory and Prodever set up and ready for you, so that there's eases that onboarding experience. And with so we've been bouncing some ideas around about how to kind of get stuff installed quickly and get you started. I don't know when exactly those will be out. That's like we had a Q4 plan, and so we'll have to see how that goes. I don't know anything more than that now.
All right, Dominic wants to know, is it possible to get those great charts in stamps into DivePort without Measure Factory?
Right. All of the charts that we were showing in stamps are available in the regular chart portal without Measure Factory. Putting them in a stamp means that the user doesn't have to, or the person setting up the page doesn't have to configure that chart. It can be sort of pre-configured in the stamp, which is nice. Now, so all those charts are available without Measure Factory. Some of the concept of stamps is available without the Measure Factory in that it's just that the self-service pages are limited to Measure Factory. So self-service pages they do use stamps, like a user can just drop a measure and a stamp on their page. But the fact that they had to pick a measure meant that whole page had to be set up around this Measure Factory, and that's why the factory is involved. But so charts and stamps without the Measure Factory is totally fine outside of self-service.
All right, Alexander asks, can you elaborate a bit on the time frame for having some form of built-in two-factor authentication for on-premises installations?
Hey, Alex. So yeah, we're looking at that for this fall or early winter as well. We are doing that already in our hosted environment with both TOTP, which is your Google Authenticator stuff, and with Duo Security. They're a little funky to set up. So there are special modules you can use from these providers on Linux. It's not friendly. So if you had a specific use case for your customers, Alex, we could probably work something out in the shorter term. But in terms of having that nice polished experience for everyone on premise without super expertise, that's coming later this year.
Eduardo asked about DiCloud, how you could migrate to that solution.
Just give us money. That's all it really takes. So we have data centers in Boston and in Amsterdam. So if you or your customers, Eduardo, want to do something like that, talk to sales or international and figure out how to make it work. But we give you a site with a name that you like, we install the software, and we'll work with you on that and talk about how the billing is going to happen.
Question from Julie, is the Metameasure Factory available now or in the future? She says she has 3 Measure Factories and it would be nice to make sure they are consistent.
I'll throw in one far future thing because I'm excited about one idea I have about how to deal with that in the future. And that's that I would like to get to a point in the future where where the dive line system as a whole can look at all the measure factories at once and not have to think about them one at a time. That's a far future plan, and I have we're working on some ideas going in that direction. For now, I believe that what we're doing is we can set up a factory that uses the output of other factories, and so then combines some of that data into one. And it's not an automatic process, so there's a little bit more of like design involved around merging the results of those factories. But that's what we can do at the moment.
Dominic asked about the possibility of a visual C plan builder.
I'm going to just jump in real quick, Kathy. Right before that, Alex Zybrands asked about 7.0. That was with respect to the expiring accounts and stuff. So Alex, in general, and everyone, we try not to put new features in 7.0 because it's the super stable, don't touch it, don't blow on it kind of release. So we generally try not to put new features in 7.0. A feature like this, which can sort of be in parallel and not touch everything, with a compelling case, we could have a conversation about that. But in general, by default, we would not do that. But on a case-by-case basis, and we do love you and all, so it's possible. Sorry, on to Dom's question. Sorry about that.
No, thank you. All right, so possibility of a visual C plan builder.
Yep. We have some ideas, and it is entirely possible. The current effort is mainly on getting the Spectre build editor up to speed. We're kind of trying to bring that up to where it's as usable as Visual Integrator is. And I think the same kind of logic applies for C plans. Once we get the Spectre build UI working the way we like it, I think we'll move on to C plans next.
Question from James. Have any of you explored graph database technology like Neo4j? He says he was looking at it a bit for how to show relationships between unstructured data. For instance, a map of company applications, the infrastructure systems they rely on, and the people that develop or support them.
So I haven't looked at this particular one. I am in passing familiarity with graph database systems, but not in the kind of detail I think that I can be very helpful here. I know that we tend to focus our efforts on analytics, and so yeah, we're looking at table-based data more often than not.
Right. Is this something that might just be a display issue? I mean, the way that the second part of that question is, maybe D3 can help display something if he has it in a tabular form or something like that. I mean, we do a lot of our charts that we've added are using D3, so there could be some customization that might be possible. I don't know, Jamie, if that side of the question is there. So.
Right. So visualizing something in the form of a graph, that is something we could definitely get into. We would want the backend data to be in the form of tables, like you say. But yeah, we've been using D3 to get more and more complicated visualizations. We're working on Sankey diagrams right now, which is a kind of flow graph diagram. So I think that would be possible. But yeah, sounds to me a little more like a NoSQL kind of unstructured data kind of problem.
All right, I'm trying to scroll through the questions a little bit right now just because we only have about a minute left. I don't know if you all have been looking through the chat, and if there's any question that you think you really want to answer in there, you can go ahead, or anything that you think will be of most mass appeal.
What about will users be able to create dashboards in Diveport? Is that maybe a question about whether it's just admin versus non-admin?
That's a good point. I think I mean, there's definitely a spectrum there. Today a user that has privileged access to a page can create portlets on that page, and that doesn't have to be a Diveport administrator, but it does mean that person has to be trained to use the portlets. which can be a kind of barrier sometimes. Self-service pages are meant to cover the other end of that, where the person with no training can create pages on their own, but it's pretty far on the other side, you know what I mean? So I think there's room for something in between. I think Springboard will cover some of that, giving users the ability to make dashboard-like content in Springboard.
All right, well, it is hard to believe that 20 minutes have already flown by. Thank you guys so much. I think that was really valuable. And I know that there were a lot of questions that we did not even see. So, we can continue the conversation in our virtual rooms. You'll see here we have 3 different virtual rooms that will be open. This will start at 3 o'clock Eastern, so just in a few minutes. We'll have one room that will handle questions about data management and Workbench, another room for front-end client questions, and then our third room is for Measure Factory questions. And then the question is, how do I get to these rooms? And so if you go back to the conference homepage, you will see this button that says Rooms. And so you will click on that. And then that will take you into the room area that has descriptions of all of the rooms, and you can just click join on the one that you want. You can also feel free to hop in between rooms. All right, I wanted to show you guys this slide. Fred talked about this in his keynote yesterday. So I wanted to thank all of you who fill out surveys from Class, Gartner, and Howard Dresner. These are immensely useful to us, and they provide us with validation that our customer-centric strategy is the right one to take. We also take the comments and feedback we receive in these surveys very seriously, and we are continually working to improve. So please continue to take these surveys and just know how appreciative we are that you do. All right, so now for the question. Where in the world is DIUC 22? You know, we really miss seeing all of you. And while technology has helped us keep connected over these last 18 months, we really want to see you all in person again. So we are planning for an in-person event next year. What was really important to us in deciding where to host next year's event was that we wanted the event to be in a new location. This map shows you where we have held DIUC in the past, so it's not going to be in any of these places. We also wanted the event to be somewhere that is easily accessible, so our divers from around the country and really around the world can join us. And we also wanted it to be somewhere where we could plan some away from the conference activities so that we could do something fun after these 18 months at our homes. So don't expect to be sitting at an airport hotel for the whole conference without seeing the outside world. So without further ado, let's announce DIUC 22, which will be held September 15th and 16th of next year in Washington, DC. You can go to our website at the URL here for more information. Our conference will be held at the Washington Marriott Georgetown, which is right near both Georgetown and DuPont Circle, both good nightlife and restaurant spots. Registration details will be forthcoming, but please know that we are planning a fun, informative, and safe event for all of us. And with that, we would like to conclude DIUC for this year. You will be receiving a survey after the event is over. Please fill it out. It will help inform our future event planning. Thank you all so much for joining us, and be well.